In this Exploring Appalachia episode, I head to the Rivertown of Hinton, West Virginia. To get there, I'll be traveling north on Route 20 from Princeton, West Virginia, through Athens and over Bluestone Lake. The crossing here where Lily Bridge now is, once known as Pack's Ferry, was once a strategic river crossing in the war between the states in the mid-1800s. But today, you'll find loads of outdoor recreation opportunities, like fishing and boating on the river down by the marina to camping at Bluestone State Park. On my way, I stopped at the Bluestone Dam. It was originally built in the 1940s and is now undergoing rehabilitation to make it stronger and more durable. The main focus of the construction is to remove fractured bedrock from the base and replace it with concrete, drains to dissipate pressure, and anchoring cables. Another goal of the construction will be to provide improved recreational areas on both sides of the dam, like launching points for kayaks and canoes, and wade-in fishing as well as shoreline fishing. I found out this rehab construction began in 2001 and isn't scheduled for completion until 2029. The dam handles water flowing from North Carolina to the Gulf of Mexico, and it sits just upriver from the confluence of the Greenbrier and New Rivers. Before I head over the bridge into Hinton, I wanted to visit the site where the John Henry statue is, just a few miles outside of town. Yes, the John Henry from the legend and the song. I was pleasantly surprised to see that the statue had been refurbished and moved from a small roadside pull-off to a more fitting place. It now has its own park and is located right in front of the historic Big Bend Tunnel. I grew up hearing the American folk tales of the steel-driving man John Henry, but he wasn't just a myth or legend. No, his real name was John William Henry, and he's buried not even more than a quarter mile from the historic Big Bend Tunnel, where his epic duel with the steam-powered drill took place some 7 years after what's commonly referred to as the Civil War. As the story goes, he was the strongest and fastest railroad worker in his day. He could drive steel spikes faster than anyone, and when the steam-powered drill was invented to ultimately replace human labor, he protested, saying he would die with a hammer in his hand before he let a steam drill beat him down. And that's exactly what he did. The Big Bend Tunnel was built because miles are money in the transportation industry. Although the tunnel is over a mile long, it cut down on an otherwise 10-mile rail route that followed the Greenbrier River around Big Bend Mountain. This would cause considerable slowdowns as trains would have to reduce speeds to navigate the sharp and curvy turns of the river route. Today, there are 2 tunnels. The name Big Bend was transferred to the new tunnel, and the original was renamed the Great Bend Tunnel. The reality is, if it wasn't for the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad Company, the little town of Hinton wouldn't be here. Following the war between the states, the railroad was in shambles, but Hinton was part of its plan to reach the Ohio River and truly link a coast-to-coast railroad. Hinton was first incorporated in 1880 with around 1,000 people, but even before that, it was becoming one of the railroad's mainline division terminals where crews and their families called the town home. Much like I found in my previous episode on Princeton, West Virginia, machine shops were constructed in Hinton along with a roundhouse, engine stalls, and a train car repair shop that provided hundreds of jobs for skilled workers.
This population growth led to a building boom, and many of those buildings still stand in Hinton's downtown, which was added to the National Register of Historic Places in the early 1980s. At one point, the city had 3 national banks, 2 bus lines, and 2 hospitals, and nearly a dozen wholesale firms and over 70 retail shops. Today, Amtrak services Hinton as it does Thurman, West Virginia. And if you haven't watched my episode on Thurman, be sure to do that after you watch this episode. CSX now owns the rail line through Hinton, which is the main line of the former C&O Railroad. Like a lot of this part of Appalachia, the coal fields kept trains rolling through Hinton and the economy stable into the 1950s. But as the railroad began phasing out steam-powered locomotives for diesel engines and the automobile became more widespread, that, coupled with the rise of airlines, passenger service declined significantly as the railroad industry here faded into history. Perhaps with a focus on alternative industries, including outdoor recreation and tourism, the local economy can see some kind of resurgence. Before leaving the area, since I was so close to Sandstone Falls, I made it a point to go see them. In the mid-1800s, a grist mill was built on this small channel of the New River, and many subsistence farmers began altering the environment around them to use for their survival. Today, beavers have built dams along this same channel where the mill once was. This changed the once swift stream into a boggy wetland area. Perhaps the beavers have the right idea, to work with our surroundings and recreate where the past once stood.